Welcome to UN News. I'm Conor Lennon. As we approach the end of the year, we're looking back at some of the stories of 2023 in which the UN has played a prominent role. Arguably, the military incursion into Gaza, which followed deadly attacks by Hamas on Israel on the 7th of October, has been the most significant in terms of geopolitical importance, the scale of destruction, and, of course, the huge numbers of civilian casualties. At the UN, the agency at the sharp end of the conflict is UNRWA, the Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. At the time of recording, in the third week of December, 135 UNRWA colleagues are known to have been killed in Gaza since the escalation. That's the most ever in one incident. And despite the danger and extremely difficult working conditions, UNRWA is continuing to assist those caught up in the fighting through no fault of their own. And the task is monumental. Nearly 2 million people have been displaced across the Strip, many of them forced to move repeatedly in search of safety. So how can the UN continue operating effectively under these conditions? Here to explain more about UNRWA and its role in the Palestinian occupied territories is the agency's Director of Communications, Juliette Touma, who's based in the Jordanian capital, Amman. Hello, Juliette.
Hi, Conor. Nice to see you.
Yes, and thank you so much for your time. Obviously, this is an extremely busy, difficult period for you. So many interviews that you're doing with broadcast media since the current escalation. But of course, this isn't your first time doing interviews on a high-profile conflict. For much of your career at the UN, you've worked in hotspots such as Syria, Libya, Iraq. How does the current conflict in Gaza compare to what you've witnessed in the past?
Yes, thank you. Look, all of this is unprecedented. It's the volume, the level of destruction, the displacement of people, the grief that this has brought on the agency that I work with, the loss of colleagues, the hits on our own facilities, the fact that all of this happened in just over 7 weeks is unprecedented, and it's nothing like I've ever seen throughout my 20 years of service with the United Nations.
And what is it particularly that you would say distinguishes this? Is it the scale of the casualties? Is it the number of colleagues who've been killed? Or is it what we've heard the head of the agency, Philippe Lazzarini, say, the scale of mis and disinformation? He even mentioned a smear campaign against the refugees and also those who are helping them.
I think it's a combination, Conor, of different factors combined. It's a very, very brutal war. The bombardment is heavy, very heavy. In fact, when I was there myself just a few weeks ago, I was awoken myself to the sound of bombardment, and bombardment was during the day, during the night. And I think I was there on day 50 of the war, and I couldn't but help myself and think, how would it be if I were a mother and I had 3 children in Gaza, and every night we would try and go to sleep to that sound of heavy bombardment in the background. So there's that. There's also the very tight siege that has been imposed on the Gaza Strip now for 7 very long weeks. The restrictions on us in the United Nations and the humanitarian community to bring in the very basic of supplies. We're talking about food and water and fuel. Very heavy restrictions on that. The influx of people coming into UNRWA shelters, now more than 1.4 million people seeking refuge in our shelter. Our own staff are grieving. They are displaced themselves. They're impacted themselves. Still, they are doing everything possible. There is, like you said, the misinformation campaign. It is, in fact, a smear campaign we have been subjected to since the very beginning of the war, with cyber attacks, including on our website as one example, or on our donate site, or on social media, all sorts of sheer lies, really, and just rumors that continue to spread like wildfire.
Could you explain a bit more about what kind of lies are you seeing?
We've seen several attacks on the agency. One about how we teach and what we teach in our schools. Our schools at UNRWA, we have 700 of them, by the way, across the region. We are the only UN agency that has schools. We use textbooks that are provided by the host governments in the 5 areas of operation. But we have hand in hand a very strict scrutiny system that looks into the content of those books. And we train our teachers all the time um, onto how to teach the content in those books so that they are aligned with the values of the United Nations, including of peace and tolerance. And so we quite often come under accusations that our schools teach hatred, which we, of course, as a United Nations agency, have zero tolerance towards. And in fact, it's the absolute opposite because our teachers are trained to provide education in a way that helps the children follow the values of the United Nations, including peace and tolerance and no hatred and no racism. So that's one very big piece of the puzzle where we come under constant attack. And then other accusations, including involvement of our staff in the war, including political affiliation of our staff with a certain armed groups in Gaza. And what all of these campaigns do to us is they weaken the efforts of what is currently the largest humanitarian organization in the Gaza Strip, catering to the needs of at least 1.4 million people who are in our shelters.
Of course, your agency is under much more scrutiny than it has been since October the 7th. So, for those who don't know much about you and what you do, could you just give us a brief overview of the agency, which has existed since the early days of the UN?
Yes, we're one of the oldest United Nations agencies. And in the context of Gaza, we are the largest United Nations agency, not just now, we've been there for more than 7 decades in Gaza. We've been largely providing education in our schools. This is the largest program. Sadly, since the 7th of October, when the war began, we had to close all of these schools, and many of those schools have been turned shelter. We also provided primary health care to over 1 million people. We provided food assistance to more than 1.2 million people. We provided cash assistance to families in need and some cash for work programs to families in need. UNRWA is seen and is currently a very trusted entity in the Gaza Strip by the communities themselves. They know what UNRWA does, who UNRWA is. And this is also why people come to our shelters seeking refuge and seeking protection and safety. They trust the United Nations blue flag to protect them and provide them with safety and with protection.
And yet, over 100 of your facilities, which are sheltering people, have been damaged since October the 7th. As I said before, over 130 colleagues of yours have been killed since then. Just as an organisation, I'm just trying to imagine what it must be like on a day-to-day basis to keep going. How do you share this distress with each other as an organisation in terms of your office culture? How do you keep going?
I think we have a team of heroes in Gaza. I mean, there's no question about that. These are our frontline workers who are there every single day in our shelters, providing assistance to people, listening to people, providing counseling, doing other things that may seem very simple, but in the context of war, they are absolutely life-saving, like collecting garbage, which started to pile up due to also to lack of fuel. It's the doctor who goes and sees an older person. It's that nurse that gives medicine to a diabetic patient. Um, Despite the fact that 70% of our staff, Connor, have been displaced themselves. They've been forced to flee their homes themselves. Many of them have lost loved ones. I mean, the colleagues that we all lost, but in addition to that, neighbors, family members, they lost their homes. They lost everything. And yet thousands of them are still putting the UN vest on every single morning, doing that odd drive to the border to bring in much needed supplies, going to provide psychological counseling to a family that had just, lost a loved one, going to sort out the medicines in one of the pharmacies. Heroic work on the ground. And I think it's also a testament to the very strong sense of community that Gaza has been known for many decades. And this is probably the civil society and the closely knit community is what kept that society together during the war, for sure, but also during what has been more than 15 years of a very, very tight blockade with several cycles of conflict in between.
Yes, 15 years. But then if we take the longer view, the agency's been going since 1949. In a way, there have been sporadic incidents. The conflict has not been resolved since 1949. So although you're in the middle of a conflict escalation right now, you're dealing with the here and now. You must be thinking, how does this play out? Have you had those kind of discussions? How do you think that this situation is going to play out in the coming months and the coming years?
We've not had this sort of discussion at all, for a very simple reason, because we're focusing on the here and now, and because this is nothing like any of us have done. We come from a team that is very well experienced in conflicts and in natural disasters and in humanitarian work, a very solid team of professionals. But I think among all of us, despite the vast experience, we all say this is nothing like we've ever seen before. And so our focus right now is to support people who need us most on the ground in Gaza. How do we get in humanitarian assistance? How do we continue to tell the story of what's happening to the people in Gaza, to our own teams? How do we raise the bar on advocating to bring an end to this war primarily through a humanitarian ceasefire? This has been our focus. Our focus has also been on getting a funding for the organization so that the organization continues to provide the assistance in Gaza. But also bear in mind, we also work in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Juliette, here in New York. We're all thinking of you, and we wish you all the best.
Conor.